to the Society for inviting me. As you've just heard, I'm an archaeologist. I'm local to the area. I work with the Historic Environment Division, which is part of the Department for Communities. A lot of people don't know what the Department of Communities is. We keep changing our name and keep getting new logos, but basically we used to be NIA, or previously the Environment and Heritage Service, EHS. So most people know what EHS is. Well, we used to be EHS, we just keep changing our name. But I'm a senior archaeological inspector. I work principally in conservation and site management and advice and regulation, primarily for statutorily protected sites. I'm not now a prehistory specialist, I'll say that up front, but I'm not representing the department here tonight, but obviously I come from the departmental background as such. I am very familiar with the site. I've worked with Mid-Ulster District Council, and prior to that Cookstown Council, on outreach activities at the site over several years. So I have to say, out of all the outreach events that I've done, and we used to have sort of regular annual ones up to COVID, it was always my favorite. It was always a really good tour, and I'm sure some of you probably were on the tour that the council would have organised. What I'm probably going to do tonight is present more questions than answers. And if you ask me questions, there's a very strong likelihood I won't know the answer, but I might. So it's always worth a punt. And I'm sure that there's people on the call tonight that probably know more about the site than I do, which would be great. And I know I've seen a couple of old heritage comrades over different things in the past. So hello to you all that know me. So without further ado, let me see if I can get this show on the road. Can everybody see the slide changes? Because sometimes it doesn't happen. Yeah, is everybody okay? Okay, so this is Beaghmore. I'm sure certainly some of you have been to the site already, but for those that might not have been on the site that are on the call, I'll just work under the premise that that you want as much information as I can give you. It's north of the Cookstown Omagh Road. It's on the road towards Dava. You basically drive over the Esker. It's a narrow wee road, but it's fantastic landscape to be driving through. It's very easily got to, as long as it's not in the snow. It's well signposted from the main Cookstown Omagh Road. So if you haven't been and you are in the country, I would strongly recommend a visit, because it is a really great site to visit. It's on the Blackrock Road, if you want to be technical, heading north towards the Six Towns Road, and it is close to Dava, so I'm sure some people would be going to Dava now with the Dark Sky Centre. So you sort of pass it before you get to the Dark Sky Centre. It's a monument in state care. So what that means is that it's statutorily protected under the heritage legislation that we have here, which is called the Historic Monuments and Archaeological Objects Northern Ireland Order 1995. That order provides two types of protection, sites in state care, and what that means is they are sites that are either directly owned outright by the state or are managed by the state. They're privately owned but are managed, and we call those sites in guardianship. And Beaghmore is a site that is in state care. The Historic Monuments Order also affords protection under scheduling, and I'm sure a lot of you would know of scheduled sites. So what that means is that a site will remain obviously in private ownership, but it's recognised that it is of at least regional importance. So the department takes an active interest and role in positive management of the site, and we do our best to help owners of sites, specifically or particularly scheduled sites, to manage their sites as well as possible. It came into state care in 1950. We also, as I've said already, work in very close partnership with Mid-Ulster Council on the site and others actually in the district. We have a very good relationship between the centre and local government here, and the guys that we work with in the council are really, really great. So a shout out to them. As you can see here, the site that this area here is in state care. Hopefully everybody can see my cursor. It's important to note that this sort of like strange R shape is just the area of the site that has been uncovered. It's not necessarily the full extent of the site, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that as we go on. It was discovered in the 1930s by a local man, George Barnett. He was cutting turf. And he came, he realized that there was something of importance under the turf, and he notified the then Ministry of Finance. It has been archaeologically excavated twice, quite early, between 1945 and 49, and again in 1965. So it's quite a while ago, and obviously our techniques and methods have developed quite a bit since then. So if we were excavating it now, we'd probably get a lot more information than we had, but it was sort of small targeted excavation. It wasn't like a full blown excavation. So what do we have? I'll go to the drawn view because it might make a little bit more sense or easier to discern. So this is basically what we were looking at, only tilted 90 degrees. We have 7 stone circles on the site. 3 are in pairs, 1 on its own. We've got pair A, B, C, D, E on its own, and F and G. We have 10 stone rows or alignments, and that's what these are, radiating out or in, depending. And 12 cairns. They are, and I'll just point out a couple of them here. Oh God, sorry. Getting too excited. I'm clicker happy. Cairns are small burial monuments. They're basically mounds made up of stone, covering often a stone-lined box called a kist. And within the kist, there's usually cremated remains of an individual, and sometimes a few grave goods in the kist as well. There's also an earlier Neolithic field boundary that predates the main features that we see here, and that's an indication of the time depth of occupation and use of this landscape, and I'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. It dates to the Bronze Age. Basically, it's the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age. The carbon-14 dates that were taken from the site show that the stone circles had been built after 1880 BC, but before 950 BC. So we're sort of talking about the lower half of the 2nd millennium BC, basically, if that makes sense. The way that I've given a lot of tours on the site, and to be honest with you, Zoom talks are easier because if you've ever been on the site, or if you go, you will realize that it's often very windy because you're at quite an elevation. In order to explain what the site, the context of the site and where it has come from, I find it helpful to sort of talk just a wee little bit about the development of Irish prehistory, just to set it in its time slot, really, and understand how we've got to where we get to at this period. So basically, the first period of known occupation of the island after the last glaciation is the Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age, and that dates from about 7,000 to about 4,000 BC. One of the earliest sites of human occupation that we know of is Mount Sandal, and I'm sure plenty of people on the call know plenty about Mount Sandal. It's in Coleraine. In the Mesolithic, the society was transitory. It was seasonal, basically. It was small groups, small family groups. They exploited seasonal natural resources, structured throughout the year. They weren't wandering aimlessly by any shape of the imagination, but because their settlements were more ephemeral, and their impact on the landscape, let's say, was more ephemeral generally, there's a lot less evidence of their life that still remains for us because it's relatively low impact. There's some Mesolithic sites that are cave sites because obviously they have been relatively undisturbed. Mount Sandal was really an exceptionally rare find. From about 4,000 BC, the Neolithic or New Stone Age comes in, and that is a massive change for society and human lifestyle on the island and British Isles in Europe. It's the introduction of farming from the ancient Near East. I can't over emphasize how much that changed life here. It meant that you had year-round settlement in one place, because obviously if you're farming, you're investing in the land, you're in the one place, more or less, you're static in the landscape, and it's a huge investment in one area, and you're dependent on that investment for survival. You just can't up and go, and if the crops fail, you can just take off and go and exploit resources elsewhere. It no longer work like that. So what we find is that in the Neolithic, we start to get megalithic monuments in the landscape, and these many of these have survived. This is a portal tomb and a passage tomb. This is in County Down. This is on the top of Slieve Gullion in South Armagh. And really, and I'm sorry for not using Tyrone sites in this, but moving swiftly on in that one. Basically, the way I explain the introduction of these big megalithic monuments is that it's the concept of ownership and investment in the land. These are substantial funerary monuments being placed in the landscape, often at high points, so where they would be readily seen. So therefore, they act as visible markers in the landscape. They indicate specific territories, and they're important symbols for their own communities, and for others as well. It's tied up also with the concept of a past right to that area of land. Ancestral connections are still there with the land. There's a lot of we think there might be like a kind of ancestor cult possibly going on with these types of monuments. But they were also, they were communal burial places, but we think for the elite as opposed to just everybody in the community. But we believe that they were likely ceremonial locations also, so possibly gathering places at certain times of the year. It wasn't that you would just bury the elite or the leader or their family in the tomb and then you would go away and until you bury somebody else. I mean, they probably held a lot of different functions for the communities throughout the year. But moving on, traveling forward in time to about 2500 BC, we come to the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age, and there's so much overlap between the two that we always sort of like bunch the two together. The reason or the differences and in this period are also massive. There's significant changes in technology, most principally the beginning of the use of metal. There's differences in tools, equipment. There's societal change. There's really a profound change in society at this stage. It's trade is obviously needed for the material to make bronze, so it was important to have a lot of connections with other communities, not just in your regional area, but much farther afield. We believe that it was an increasingly stratified society. There was an elite class, there were traders, there were metal workers. And I think it's important to remember that transforming these basically rocks that hold these different minerals like tin and gold into these like tools and ornaments and jewelry, and that the metal workers were really like almost like magic makers, like alchemists in a way. So it really was a profound change. The working of gold into very high status objects for the elite is a major feature of this period. And also we have changes in the ritual features that we find now being placed in the landscape. And they are stone circles, rows, standing stones, and kiss burials. And there we have Beaghmore sitting in this this context of society and change. So just to give a bit of a distribution map here, there's over 100 stone circles in Ulster, but a lot or most of them tend to be in the Sperrins. There's two main concentrations of stone circles on the island overall: Mid Ulster, as you can see here, and South Munster. What the first question I would throw out is, does the known spread of sites that you can see here on the screen, does that indicate a particular ceremonial culture that is practiced, or is it actually just the circumstance of survival? Certainly we do find these types of ritual features at certain elevations, but that also may be related to survival. However, we do believe that people were living at these elevations and later in time moved to more lowland areas as the peat started to develop in the more upland areas. And I can talk a wee bit more about that as we go on. So drilling down a wee bit more locally. So this is a bit of a crazy graphic here, but this is Beaghmore here. So we're sort of the Omagh Cookstown line is sort of here somewhere. this is Beaghmore, and as you can see, and if you know the area at all, that's Dava up here. So you're sort of like heading north up the road this way. So as you can see, all these dots indicate a prehistoric feature. So Beaghmore sits within a very heavily ritualized landscape, a very ceremonial landscape. What I would say is all of the dots are not contiguous in time. They're not contemporary. So, and that's an important point for everybody to remember, that a lot of these tombs, for example, would predate Beaghmore, the stone circle complex. So the wedges would be later, but really the point of the reason why I included this graphic is to show that the builders of the stone circle complex at Beaghmore were not doing it in isolation. They were doing they were re-ceremonializing an already ritual and ceremonial landscape, and putting the physical stamps of their belief system onto an already important landscape for the people that lived there previously. Just going here, I know that this probably doesn't really make an awful lot of sense, but this is a screenshot from the historic environment map viewer, which I'm sure definitely some people on the call at least have used extensively. But just to explain where we are, this is Beaghmore here, and again, all the dots are archaeological sites. The red filled in zones, they are scheduled zones. So anywhere here that has like a little red area around the dot, these are they have statutory protection on them, so they're also recognized as sites of at least regional importance. But we continued to schedule every year, so the scheduling program continues. Just to explain, the Beaghmore site that you would visit is here. This is the area to the north of the fence. So this area here is in private ownership, but it's scheduled because we know that the site extends to the north. To the north side of the fence. So going back to what I said at the first aerial photograph, really what you see whenever you visit is just what's been uncovered. There is a lot more under the peat. Some of it we know, and some of it we don't yet know. So that's just an important thing to be aware of. But a lot of these dots are it's pre-bog landscape, such as field walls, cairns, possible megaliths, ring cairns, kists, all of those sorts of things. Also, some of you will definitely know, also we have another site in state care, Copney Stone Circle Complex, which is just further to the west on the Omagh Cookstown Road, and it has a lot of similarities with Beaghmore. We have no public access route to the site. We can organize and facilitate visits for interested parties, but it is going through an active farm environment, and also it's not very easy to physically walk to. So if anybody's interested in that, you can come to me after about that, but I would advise going to Beaghmore. So where do we see? Where's my wee dot? Here we go. Here's back to the hang on. Yeah. back to our aerial photograph. So basically, this site of Beaghmore is important, not just in the local prehistoric landscape, but hopefully I'm able to convey that it is of national importance. It's one of the most extensive stone circle complexes that we know of. And as I said, only part of the site has actually been uncovered. The alignments that you can see here travel on under the peat. This is actually the field boundary here, and carry on. And there's almost 100% certainly other features here that just hasn't been uncovered, and that's okay. That's because that means they're safe and they're protected and they're not going to come to harm. The thing is, we don't actually know how far the site extends. So what we're looking at here, although it's actually quite extensive for a stone circle complex, it could actually only be a relatively small fraction of it. We don't know. So then it comes to the question, what does it all mean? What was it for? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 3 little bits of the site in a wee bit more detail. It's going to be circle AB here, circle E here, and circles F and G here, and a cairn with a round ditch, with a ditch here. So if we go to AB, so this is can make it a wee bit easier to see. It's because it's actually quite hard to see on the ground, just the shape of the circles and whatever. Firstly, what I would say is what we are, it might look slightly uneven and slightly higgledy-piggledy. What I would say is that is deliberate. Our ancestors knew exactly how to make straight lines and true circles if they wanted to. So everything that we see here has a meaning. We just don't necessarily know what the meaning is. So this is our little cairn here, and the 2 circles are straddle it either side, and we have 4 stone rows or alignments emanating either to or from it. You can see the 2 inner ones are of larger stones, and the 2 outer ones are of smaller stones. Now, actually stone rows are a feature that are associated with stone circles in the Mid-Ulster group. So what we're looking at here is actually a relatively common feature of our stone circles here. And also another common feature is the use of different sizes of stones, larger ones and then smaller, as a smaller row beside it. So everything here, it wasn't just that, oh, well, we couldn't get the larger stone or we couldn't get the smaller stone. Everything here is a deliberate choice. When I've taken different school groups and that here, and it's really interesting to ask them to think about, well, what came first? Did the cairn come first? Did the circles come first? Did the alignment come first? What? My interpretation is that the cairn would have come first, because as you can see, the stone circles at either side are basically respected. As you can see, the wee kink here and here. Obviously, whenever the cairn was put in, if the stone circles were there previously, they could have just joggled these the stones here to suit. But I think it's quite possible that this came first. That's not to say that they weren't very close in time. We don't know, but definitely there is a connection between cairns and and the circles. And in Company, actually, what we find is that the cairns sit within the centre of the stone circles, as opposed to the side of them. The other thing is that I also pose the question: do the alignments or rows go to the cairn and the circles, or do they go from the cairn and the stone circles? I think that's up right now for personal interpretation. I've my own personal view on that, but it's each man for himself on that one. There was a cremation, actually, lacking a skull, found in the kist under one of the cairns in the site, and the kist also I held a teeth bulla for selenite axe. That is, they are really, really high status objects of the prehistoric period, very extensively traded. So what that tells us is that the person who was cremated, that was set into that kist, was of significant importance in the regional area, and also that there were well exercised trade routes between the communities and the Sperrins and much farther afield. So moving on to Circle E. Now this one is unusual on this site because it is filled with a whole load of smaller stones, and as you can see here, the cairn is I suppose forms part of the circle, but the perimeter of the circle. At Copney, which is just down the road, as I said, the cairns tend to be here, and all the stone circles are filled with smaller stones. So obviously the association between the burial and the circle is very, very strong. We don't know what the filling of the stones means. Whenever I've given this presentation before, or on the site, I tell a story that we had a partner. It did live in history for us for years, and it was like a big part of our outreach and community engagement for many years. And one of the ladies that ran the company, she came to the site a number of times, but whenever she went into the circle, her hair actually sort of started to stand up, you know, the way sometimes like we get like static, and whenever she walked out of the circle, it went down again. Now what I would say is I am not saying in any shape or form that there's some like magic or woo-woo or anything like that going on, but there's obviously some sort of electromagnetic thing or phenomenon that happened. Maybe it was to do with the weather, or I don't know what. I'm sure there's like a physics reason for it, but obviously these things would have happened in prehistory, and perhaps this circle was maybe put there because these sorts of things were happening. I don't know. I mean, I get an electric shock every time I get out of the car door. I get an electric shock from the door. So it's not it's not magic, but there's a lot that we don't know within the prehistoric mind, that we're only getting a very small like just little pieces of the jigsaw, and we're sort of trying to see the whole picture. And every little bit of research, and when other sites are excavated or researched, and there's additional techniques and environmental evidence and all the rest of it, we get another little piece of the picture that gets that gives us the overall story. So going to circles F and G, and this is cairn 10 here, and it's got a lovely ring ditch. It's obviously that this cairn is different from all the others because it's the only one that has been uncovered that has a ring ditch. That in itself isn't overly unusual, but it's evidently unusual at this site. Sometimes we find burials in ring ditches, but we don't find the cairn, but it's actually a pit instead. And I excavated one of those myself in Crumlin years ago. As you can see, there's also alignments connected to this part of the site. I think now's the time to say, because I know this will be a question that is in everybody's head about, is there an astronomical alignment? Because I know you're probably thinking about Newgrange and Stonehenge and this, that, and the other. There is no proven astronomical alignment at this site. It had been a theory connected with the site for a substantial number of years, actually, but Terry Mosley from the Irish Astronomical Association, who would do the outreach events for the council alongside myself, he's confirmed that there are no known direct links at this site. Interestingly, Michael McDonough, he's the chief archaeologist of the OPW in the Republic, actually. At the minute, he was the one that excavated the part of the Company Stone Circle complex that was excavated. He has written an article about the stone circles in the Sperrins region, and he thinks, his theory is that these complexes are representations of the visible face of the moon. Now, there's definitely connections with the moon and prehistoric megalithic sites, for sure. However, in this instance, I personally don't think his argument for that is strong enough and demonstrated, but that's his theory. So basically, I'll go back. Where do we see? I'll go back to the main A piece, but you can get a good look at what's what. So basically, what does it all mean? What happened here? Evidently, there was the burial of high status individuals at this site. In the Bronze Age, we see in the archaeological record that it tends to move away from more communal burial and to individual burial, which is what we see in the cairns, because there's usually only one individual found in the kists. What I would also say, though, is that these sites would have been used for ceremonies and rituals, not just necessarily for burial or the rituals and ceremonies associated with the actual burial itself. They were more than likely assembly places. The way that I try and conceptualize it, I think, is it's almost like a prehistoric example of how we would use our community centres or orange halls or that nowadays. There can be lots of different uses of a particular place at different times of the year as the years go on, etc. What we can say for certain is that there must have been a considerable settlement of community in this landscape generally. The evidence of that settlement is going to be more ephemeral than necessarily the ceremonial sites or the ceremonial places that the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age people would have had. So they're now under the peat, we'd imagine, don't know where they lived, but it's under the peat there somewhere. It also reflects a collective effort of the community in the area. It indicates an organised society. It would indicate a stratified society, a society that is trade links. It's not insular. It's not inward looking. It's not, this is our little spot and we don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. Certainly we can see that in the Mid-Ulster group, there are similarities. There's definite similarities, as I was saying, with the stone rows, with the larger stones and the smaller stones. There are a lot of similarities across the board. So that means that they were, you could say they were following a particular template. There's obviously like some variations between that, but you could say it was a template, or you could say that whatever the belief system was, whatever the purposes of these of these sites were, that it required certain things, that so it indicates a shared belief and ceremonial system across large expanses of land. And I mean, we get stone circles across the British Isles, not widespread everywhere, but there are certain locations where there'd be greater concentrations. Obviously there's lots of stone circles in Scotland as well, Wales, and basically the Atlantic seaboard also. So it is part of a belief system, a landscape use tradition that spans across a very wide region, but just with smaller, I suppose, micro regional differences and quirks. There is no evidence that we have at present of stone circles really being built after about 1000 BC. Part of the reason for that may be that there was in the sort of the later Bronze Age, from about say about 1200 BC right through to about 300 BC, there was a deterioration in climatic conditions. It also part of the reason was that they had cut so many of the trees down that the soils deteriorated quite badly, and they no longer supported agriculture to the same extent, and which is what caused the blanket peat to start and begin to form. So it became unviable to actually use these areas. And what we find is that these more upland areas that are very peaty and boggy now, and don't necessarily have lots of trees or whatever, that's not the way it was before humans exploited the land, I suppose you could say. So the upland areas were abandoned. So they could have brought these traditions with them to the more lower elevations, but obviously the lower elevations have had a lot more ongoing land use over the millennia. So they could have been completely swept away, and we only get them in the more upland areas, protected and buried under the peat, and now we're finding them. But what I would also say, I suppose, to end is with a note of caution. And I was actually reading this the other day. Aubrey Burrell, I'm sure some of you probably have his book. He wrote like a little book on, well, he wrote extensively on stone circles, but he wrote the Shire Archaeology book on stone circles, and he's very highly respected prehistorian and only passed away in the last few years. He said in that book, a visitor to a stone circle today almost certainly does not see what the original builders erected. So really, I invite you to visit this site and others, and really think about what the uses could be, what type of society built them, and also that it's almost like looking at it through a smeared window. We're only seeing part of the picture, and that's part of the interest, obviously, for us all. And if I knew everything, I'd be out of a job, and that wouldn't be great either. So I'm sort of grateful. But anyway, I think that is about me. So happy to take questions, comments, criticisms, anything and everything. Please feel free.
Thank you so much, Maybelline. That is absolutely fascinating. I've been up there a few times myself, and you do have different thoughts every time you go up. But one thing, I never got any sense as yet of standing in either a community centre or an Orange Hall, so that's a different aspect. Anyhow, we'll throw the meeting open for any questions anyone might have for Maybelline.
Be gentle, everybody. Be gentle.